welcome to the webinar, guys. So I haven't done this for a very long time. This is gonna be a new installment that I'm gonna try to do consistently on a weekly basis. Basically, what I'm going to try to do is at least show you what was the most interesting move that happened the previous week. What are those easier trades that you could have taken the last week? What are the easier trades that you could start looking into this following week, and potentially some Q&A with you guys, some questions you guys have that I can try to help you guys solve, any kind of psychological questions, that sort of thing. I received a few DMs from people on X about some stuff they want to cover as well, some psychological questions they have, so I'll probably dive into that as well. So there is not going to be a strong structure around this as usual. Okay, not as usual, but like what I was saying, I'm gonna try to do this consistently, maybe on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. So along the way, if I feel that there's a kind of structure that benefits you and help you learn and really adapt to the market, I'll try and do that. But for this week, we'll try to keep it easy. I'll talk to you guys as much as you guys can, as much as I can. If you guys again have any questions, that you can put it on the chat, and I'll get right into it after the analysis. Okay, so again, welcome everyone. Glad to have all of you guys joining me today, and let's get started. I'm gonna first share my screen. Okay, perfect. So I'm looking at EURUSD now. This is a pair everyone was looking at last week. It was a very clear buy, at least on the 4-hour time frame. If we really look at the 4-hour time frame, and if I use the replay button right here, I want to start off with this particular market, this particular chart analysis, because it has a few things that I feel a lot of traders can learn from. But first things first, it's a trending market, right? And it's pulling back, and from everything that you have learned so far, if we have a pullback into support equals resistance area, which is right around this zone right here, all right, you want to see things slowing down, and then potentially buyers showing that they're coming back, and then pulling back into this potential area to potentially see a test, and then see the market to drive off towards the upper side, right? A lot of people were looking at this, right? And then things just started to not play out as expected. So for this particular market, the one thing that I really want to get people to really understand is, when you have an expectation of what the market is going to do, don't try to hold on to it too long, or don't try to hold on to it too strongly, right? Be nimble enough to say that there is a point where this trade is not going to work out anymore. And sometimes there is warning signs, sometimes there's not. But for this particular pair, EURUSD, everything looks clear and good so far, right? Without changing time frame, if we're just looking at this time frame alone, things looks clear, right? Except perhaps for this strong candle moving down right here, everything else looks fine, right? We push down into this trap area, and you should see a lift off from that area, correct? Be really engaging with me, guys, because I really need to see your feedback here to understand if you guys are following along. But everyone should understand that at this point, we should see buyers coming back. Now, this is the part where having an expectation of the market is really helpful, because what you're expecting for, and the next part of your analysis is questioning if the market is doing what you want to do. So we know the whole world is looking at this. EURUSD is one of the biggest traded market globally, and this is just following a textbook trend pullback analysis. When you have something that looks as textbook as this, you should see pushes towards the upside fairly quickly. And that is if everyone is looking for the buys, and that is if the bigger boys are also looking for the buys. Now, it's fair enough that we push down very strong, and we need to really digest this move towards the downside. But look at how long price stalled here, right? Price stalled here for from February 11th until 17th. That's almost like four or 5 days, right? That's almost the first warning sign that tells you that if you have executed any trades within this area here, that's not a good sign, right? That's a very, very bad sign, because again, if things were to look good, what are you expecting the market to do? You're expecting the market to move up very quickly. But because it's stalling like that, that's not a good sign. So the next thing that you really want to see is a probe. If we probe down into this area here, do we see a quick rejection back up? If we do see a quick rejection back up, perhaps the market is now back alive. Now, as it stands, if we're looking at this right here, okay, right at this spot here, there's a few things that you can potentially try to anticipate. Okay, now this webinar is really just, I'm just walking you through everything step by step as though I'm looking at this live, so you can learn as much as you can from this analysis. Okay, I'm gonna change this. Let's just change this to lighter color. Let's say blue. Okay, so right here we know this is a zone where a buy could happen, right? A buy could really activate from, and then we're stalling here and we're forming a range, right? So some of you guys are intraday traders, some of you guys are swing traders, some of you guys are, you know, looking for a very, very long-term trade. But what I'm trying to say here is we know this is a trap, and what usually happens in a trap? In a trap, we know buyers are going to be buying from the bottom. As we see here, buyers buying, buyers buying, buyers buying. And we know sellers are going to sell from the top. Top, selling, selling, selling. So as we break this range intraday, right, there is going to be people looking for a sell towards the downside. There's people going to be looking for the buys with the bigger players right there. Your job is to, let's say if you're an intraday trader, right, your job is not to hold on to analysis too long thinking that this buy is definitely going to work. Your job is to see what's going to happen between these two areas. Is this going to be, you know, a spike out, spiking people out towards the sell side and then catching everyone off guard, and then the buys will resume from there? Or is this going to hold here, and this whole potential thing is just a trap to push price lower? I know with hindsight, we know where this is going to go, but those are the things that you have to consider, okay? And if we remove my hideous drawings, and if we really drop down to the 60-minute and see what's happening around that area, you know, we will be able to see that if we are looking for a sell, what do you need to see? You need to see price really slowing down around this area here, and then potentially look for a turn, right? Now, the flip side is if we reject strong towards the upper side, everyone down here who was looking for a sell, they're now trapped, right? So if they're now trapped, you want to look for a pullback and look for a push towards the upper side. Those are the two scenarios that you're looking for. Either a slow pullback for a sell, or a strong rejection back up, indicating that this is just a trap, and then look for the buys towards the upper side. Okay, so far, does that make sense? Now, having all of that said, if you really fast forward here, we see price reacting back up, but is this a good enough sign that tells you the buys could resume? You want to see at least a multiple, you know, test towards upper side. Now this part here, if I really zoom in again, if let's say we have pushed towards the upper side, okay, barely make a V formation, as you guys know that, you know, that's one of the techniques that we use at Urban Forex. We barely make a lopsided V formation, we make an equal V formation, all right, this V formation right here, all right, and then we started to test. If let's say buy shows power towards upper side again and holds, that's where the buys will resume. However, because we have this scenario in mind that a sell might happen, look at the way that price pushes down. A second test towards the downside, a pullback towards the underneath side of this range, and then pushes down forward. I'm walking through this analysis to anyone who was looking for a buy on EURUSD 2 weeks ago. Okay, I'm trying to talk to you, any of you guys who are looking for a buy here, because there's a lot of warning signs that tells you this buy wasn't gonna work. All right, so anyway, we have this push down towards the sell side, and that's pretty much where you want to call it quits for this potential buy, because things do not look good anymore. If we go back to the 240 time frame, we are able to see, if I clear everything out, that what if I draw my range like that, right? You know, we were just holding a support, breaches down, pull back into resistance, and then we're now pushing lower. At this stage, you know that anyone who was thinking of a buy around here, here, or here, all of this area, they are now all trapped, which means on a push down like this, if we do get a pullback, you want to start thinking about the sells instead. This is where you want to start switching sides. Okay, now this is not something that I really recommend people doing because it's pretty tricky. If you switch sides too early, you may get caught on the wrong side, because if you switch sides in this area here, you would really lose a lot of money switching to buy side, sell side, you know, all the time. But if we do see price pulling, trying multiple times, and at this last this area where it's like last resort for the buys to actually work and it still failed, that's where things are going to turn around, right? And if we mark that area out on a lower time frame, there is a perfect entry into this area to push for a lower push down, right? So if we see price going higher into this support equals resistance area, exactly like how it's taught in the P2P program, you know, we see price slowing down, two-legged move towards the upper side. What is this candlestick pattern here, the shooting star, and then we see from there a move towards the downside. Now, I'm not gonna go specifically into the entry here. My goal here is just to get everyone to understand, you know, the overall direction of the market, and understanding, you know, what are the price point that you want to pay attention to, because getting in it's not that difficult. There is so many different ways of getting in. You could just get in based on looking at these candlesticks alone. You can get in going down to the lower time frame, but you know, getting in is one part of the puzzle. The other part of the puzzle is to understand, is your bias, you know, is your trade idea still working? So in this case, we know, okay, on the 240 that initially this all looks good for a buy. Everyone's looking for a buy. And as soon as this last resort here, this last point where the buyers should go failed, that's where, you know, the floodgates are gonna open. Sorry, not floodgates. The floodgates are gonna open, right? And as soon as we see, you know, this push towards downside, you know, prices continue to move down lower from much later, not here, but yeah, much later. We continue to move down. Go back to the daily. All right, that's where price continue to move down. Now, even on the daily, you can see things pretty clearly, right? Things looks like two-legged push towards the downside, right? The second leg was a little bit stronger, but even on the daily, you don't see that, you know, buyers are really back in control, except for this area here, which caused a lot of attention. We breached down, trapping everyone in this area here. We extract that towards the right. That's where, you know, this trend is really failing. You know, we see price holding grounds here, and then price just continue to cascade lower. Okay, so the thing is this, right? Not all trend pullback are going to perform perfectly well. You want to pay attention to the one that's not so obvious, if that makes sense. The really obvious one, those are the ones that you want to be a little bit careful of. Because there's this one other thing which can really help you stay on top of, you know, how valid this trend pullback is. If I pull on the volume on this pair, and if you look at where the high volume is, the high volume is all at the top here, right? On this move towards the downside, that's not a good thing, all right? That's telling you there is sellers trying to sell this. If you see high volume like this at the top of the trend and price is pulling back, you want to be a little bit careful. I'm not saying that it's going to fail for sure, but if you see signs of failing, right, you may want to jump onto the other side, selling it a little bit quicker, because after that, you may not get a sell opportunity. We are right here right now, right? We don't really see a pullback. In between though, if you're on a lower time frame, yeah, there's a few opportunities I see here and there, like areas like this, a little bit of a pullback. It's a bit difficult to get in because things move really quickly, but you can see from the zone that, you know, we were all looking at on the 4-hour time frame, which is right here, we do see some sort of pullback, right? A breach down into this area here, pulling back into this trap area that we were talking about, and then, you know, things really started to collapse from there. There's a few trades to be taken from this area here, but the big one actually just happened right off the open last week, Monday. They just gap down and then continue moving lower. Okay, Shorts Rest, you're asking, hello sir, I want to ask one question. When I was trend pullback strategy, and sometimes I took 4 to 5 stop loss in a row, so then I think this strategy is not good. So how can I handle it? What can I do? Okay, that's a very interesting question, because this is the part where everyone really needs to understand, and everyone sort of needs to understand this regardless of what kind of strategy you're trading. So think about this, think about it like that. When you're looking at a market, okay, when you're looking at a market, you have 2 things you want to be focusing on. The first thing is understanding what's your analysis, aka what's your bias, right? BIAS. What's your bias? If I'm looking at this EURUSD, okay, if I'm looking at this EURUSD, the first thing that will come to my mind is my bias here is I'm looking for a pullback to wait for an entry, and then looking for price to get all the way up to the top. Okay, so that's my bias. My target is to get price to come down, get an entry, go for the buys. All right, that's my bias. That's the first part of your analysis. The second part of your analysis, which is the part where most people don't really get, is getting an understanding of the direction is not difficult, right? Understanding the entry and being able to execute well, manage well, trade well, that's the part that's difficult. That's the part where you're being tested as a trader. Because if you look at everywhere online, doesn't matter, YouTube, X, any community, anyone can read the markets and anyone can come out with all sorts of analysis. All right, but the actual trading part, that's where it gets tricky. So if, let's say today, right, you get in on let's say today I take a few entries here, maybe a couple of break even, 1 loss, all right, and then price in the end decided to move all the way up here. Now, was I right on the trade or was I wrong on the trade? This is the part where you got to understand, if you have taken multiple losses here and price went all the way up, reaching your bias target right here, that makes you a very, very shitty trader. Because you were able to analyze the market well. You knew exactly where price is going to go. You know where your target is. Price went to your target, but because you still made a loss on it, that just tells you that you're a shitty trader. Now, not trying to offend anyone here, but that's the hard truth, right? You are no different than the the news people anchor that's talking on the news, telling you where EURUSD and how strong the dollar is against the euro, right? You're no different than that, right? They can't trade as well, and you can't trade. Again, not trying to offend anyone here, because I've been in the same boat. Sometimes when I take a trade, I still have the same fuck up, right? So then the next thing that you want to ask is, okay, usually when I trade a trend pullback trade, right, does my trade usually reaches the target? If it usually reaches the target without me, then I need to fix my entries, right? It's pretty much as simple as that. If it usually reaches the target without you, then you have to fix your entries, right? Then there is something within your entries that you need to be working on, something in your execution. Now, the more advanced part of all of this, okay, is being able to not take a losing trade even if the trade fails. So we have 3 types of situation, right? We have 3 types of situation. The first situation is if we get a pullback, you get your entry, price goes, happy days for everyone, right? Pop open a beer and then you start celebrating with your mates, right? That's the best situation ever. Second scenario is you fuck up on your management, all right? You take a loss on it, trade went to target, Okay, that's where you have to start beating yourself up a little bit, because there is something you clearly need to improve. The third type of situation right here is you fuck up on the entries and then things just collapse. Okay, that's perfectly fine, because the trade wouldn't work anyway. You sort of feel a little bit better because the trade failed anyway. Now this is the part where all traders should aspire to be. Okay, ready? This is the part where all traders should aspire to be, which is scenario number 4. Get in on a trade, not taking a losing trade on it, perhaps a 0.1R, 0.5R, a small loss on it, and the trade fails. This is the part where all traders should aspire to be, because this is the part where you're managing the trade well, you're executing the trade well. Even if your entire bias fail, you're not taking much damage from it. Listen to this very carefully. If you're able to not take any damage when your trade loses money, you're in a very, very good spot. Because as soon as your trade makes money, instantly your risk to reward overall would increase dramatically. Does that make sense? So I'm not here to give you guys, or we don't really have time to really dive into the exact entries, execution, all that kind of thing. But I just want to give you guys an idea of, how do you want to think about it? How do you want to maneuver your thought process around, all this type of situation? When you have a trend pullback setting up, and you take a few losing trades on it, how do you want to think about it? Does that make sense? Shorts, RAS. Hopefully you get a grip on how to really think about that. There's someone saying the failure example are always the best. Yeah, you just need to make sure you don't get in too early. Okay, now speaking of failure examples, I want to draw your attention to gold. Good old gold. All right, so gold and silver has been going crazy for the last couple of months actually, and I'm thinking that this is a top. I'm thinking that we could start to see a huge reversal from this area. Yeah, mainly because I was out at a gathering a couple of weeks ago, and it was my partner's birthday, and then one of her friends got her actual gold. Right now, this friend specifically does not know anything about the markets, have no clue what the market is, what are the currencies doing, what are the metals doing, and they started to give my partner gold as a birthday present. And that's the point where I'm starting to get a little bit fishy about what people are thinking about gold. The thing is, when you see people who don't look at the markets telling you that things are looking good, that's exactly the point where things are about to start going into shit. And that's why I started to look into gold, and I want to see what's really happening here. And if you look at this whole move towards the upper side, we see really, really small candles, right? Compared to what we saw earlier, and compared to what is happening right now. Sorry. But yeah, very, very small candle, very, very small candle, and things start to pick up a lot during this move towards the downside here. A huge reversal. Naveen covered this in the webinar last week, I believe. But this is something I wanna go over again. We see a huge volatility coming in, and a huge reversal coming in. And by the time we had this dip into this moving average, things are still crawling back up. But just look at the way that's crawling back up, right? Think about the sentiment in the market. The sentiment in the market is saying, let's get in, let's buy the hell out of gold, right? But look at the way that it's buying. Does it look strong in your opinion? Does it look powerful? Does it look like it's going to continue going? No, right? It's not looking like that at all. And look at this huge move down. One bar just completely undone all of this move towards the upper side. What is this? One whole month of move towards the upper side. And this is one of the strongest down candle, strongest down day in a very, very long time. We have never seen such strong down day, you know, on this move up before. And okay, fine. If we do see a reversal back up quickly, showing signs that the big boys are interested in picking up the buys, then yeah, it's gonna be good. But just look at the way that's going up. Right, I don't even need to use any kind of analysis here, but just look at the way that's moving out. We can see touches the area, touches the support equals resistance area, a little push towards upper side, pull back, you know, constantly making higher highs and higher lows. Now the classical way of reading this thing would be, you know, we are in an uptrend, so things still look good. But does it though? Does it really look that good though? Right, we see higher highs, higher lows, and you know, look at this last push towards the downside. Yes, this is a higher low. It's still a higher low, but look at one move completely undoing this 4 move towards the upper side. My gut instinct is telling me that this is going to be the top. That's gonna be a very bold call. I'm either gonna look like a fool on the internet saying stuff like this, or you know, in a couple of weeks time, I'm gonna look like a hero. I've just posted this up on X, so I have, you know, proper proof that, you know, I called this out earlier on X. So if this thing does shit the bed, you know, at least I have proof that, you know, I called it early. Okay, but yeah, you know, if you guys are looking at this, that you have a long-term investment on this, just be a little bit careful. What I'm anticipating, at least for the next couple of weeks or so, is looking for things to, not couple of weeks, sorry, next couple of days, is for this to really slow down. And if we do see rejection to make higher highs here, I think I want to look for a potential short-term, no, not short-term, potential entry into this sell here, and perhaps things could go a lot further. Now, if we put on volume, remember what we saw earlier on EURUSD? We have sort of the same price action logic here. Uptrend, high volume pushing down, and then things are just crawling towards upper side. When's the next time we see a higher volume? This move right here. Super high volume. So we can look at this on both sides. If we're looking for a buy into this area, I'm gonna go down to the lower time frame. If we're gonna look for a buy into this area right here, is that gonna be a good buy? No, you don't want to buy this because the pullback is very strong with high volume. Okay, fine. Do you want to look for a sell? Perhaps we could look for a sell, but this is gonna go against, you know, the trend. So it's gonna be a bit tricky, but you can definitely look for that. Okay, I'm down on the 240 time frame here, and if let's say, you know, we're looking for a sell, we want to use the concept of traps, you know, everything that you have learned so far from the Pip to Profit program, right? So let's go back to this area right here. Let's use market replay. Okay, on the 240 time frame, we have push up, pull back, and then, you know, on the next push towards the upper side. Things are looking good so far. Now again, everyone's gonna look for a buy into this area here, and when price drops, boom, like that, everyone's gonna be trapped. All right, who specifically are gonna be trapped? People right there. Okay, so when you see price pulling back into this huge zone here, that's where things are gonna get interesting, right? We are still around about that area. Last week we tried to pull back into it, you know. I thought this could be, you know, really the end of it, but you know, we're still hovering around that area. Now what's happening right here? Now we have the classic area of, not classic area, but a typical range basically. Does this just look like the EURUSD, but on the flip side? Right now, EURUSD, we were looking for a buy, right? And there was a range on top of a range, that sort of thing. But on gold, we have the same thing here. So now this is the part where, you know, it gets a little bit interesting, where I want to see a possible move towards upper side and then rejecting back down. If we do see that coming into this trap area and we see the momentum slowing down and, you know, seeing a fake range breakout, you know, it's again something I covered in one of the YouTube videos before. If we do see something like that, that's gonna be a sell that I want to be looking for to push price down towards lower side. Again, if we do continue to move lower, again on the pullback, that's something also that you can potentially look out for a potential sell. This whole situation doesn't look good for the buy side at all, right? Now, my bias here is to look for a sell, at least, right? At least at a minimum to this area here, okay? Or, okay, let me take that back, at least to this area here, at least. Right? And then we can reassess what's gonna happen. If I do a webinar next week, we will come back and have a look at what, you know, Go exactly did. But yeah, overall, I'm looking for a potential sell on Go. Okay, all of the dollar pairs right now are still looking fairly strong, right? We have the markets gapping down on EURUSD, dollar Swiss also, you know, sort of gapped up this morning. So dollar is still looking pretty strong. That's why I'm looking for a short sell for gold. Okay, if you want to look for me on X, you can easily do so. My handle is @trader_Lucas Han. Okay, again, one more thing, @trader_Lucas Han. You guys can follow the trade. You guys can follow the goal there. You know, you can shoot me a question if you guys have one. I'm not able to get to all the questions, but I'll do my best. Crystal clear. Oh, good. Okay. The other pair that I wanted to talk about is dollar Swiss. Now, dollar Swiss was very interesting last week. We have, again, a very clear trend pullback situation on the 240 time frame, right? A push towards the upside, we have pullback towards the downside. What do we have here? It looks like we have a V formation and a test is coming in, right? Now this V formation is appearing right at the breach area right here. So according to the pattern, everything looks clear for a buy, right? But again, I want to make sure that you don't just look at the pattern itself. You want to take market context. You want to take logic into account, okay? Because the pattern will only bring you that far, right? It gets a lot of views when I talk about patterns on the internet, but that's not necessarily what's going to help you become a better trader. That's why I'm hosting webinars like this, to make sure that, you know, everyone do not deviate from just looking for patterns in the market. Okay, now if we do a full rundown on dollar Swiss right here, if I just pop to the daily time frame, you will be able to see that we are right below a huge resistance area within a downtrend, and that's not a good sign, right? That's not a good sign for a buy. But at the same time, on the 240 time frame, things looks like there is possibility to move up higher. Now, without even going to the weekly time frame, I'm just staying on the daily time frame itself. I feel that there is still a possibility that we could still make a next move towards the upper side, unless we see strong pushes back down towards the downside. Then yes, people are trapped, right? Because right now, one thing's for sure. We know one thing is for sure, and that is this area here has invited a lot of buyers, because like I was showing you guys earlier on the 240 time frame, when we breach this towards upper side, this pullback has definitely got a lot of buyers involved, right? So we know that's for sure. Okay, the next thing that we need to understand is, or the next thing that we need to figure out is, are the buyers performing? If the buyers are not performing, it's time for us to look for a sell. But it's too early right now to look for a sell, because the buyers are still pretty much in control, because they are looking for the buys right here. Now what you want to do from there is, okay, understanding that, you know, the bias is still on, can we look for a buy then? Is there a possibility for us to look for a buy? I guess there is, because we have a V formation of this range, of this breach area here. We're pulling back into it and things are slowing down. Now, if I go back down to the 60-minute, things do look like, you know, after this V formation right here, right, we're coming back down to the bottom of the range and things may slow down right here. If we do see rejection, this could be a move towards the upper side. The thing about this is there is a gap involved. Okay, and market tends to close the gap when they're getting, you know, not getting close to it, but at some point we're gonna get close to closing the gap. If we close the gap and price, you know, ended up here, that's not going to be a good sign. So what I really want to see is what's gonna happen here. Are we gonna spike down and then come right back up? If that does happen, if the market closes its gap and they're rejecting strong towards the upper side back within this range, then that could still be a buy. That could still be a buy, you know, for a typical trend pullback to get price up towards this area here. If that doesn't happen, if we do see a rejection like that, like again, like the EURUSD trade that I was showing you guys, and then pushing back down, okay, then people are likely going to be trapped. And you know, I don't need to repeat what's gonna happen if people are trapped, and I don't need to repeat what you want to do when people are trapped. Right, so right now it still looks a bit vague in terms of what you need to do right now. I still want to, you know, see a few more candles being printed to really get an understanding of the overall bias that's happening on dollar Swiss. Okay, the whole thing is try to anticipate what the market is gonna do and then see what the market is doing. Let's see if they go hand in hand. If there is a contradiction somewhere, then you need to start thinking about plan B and start thinking about the alternative. How we can enter in highly active market when price doesn't come to support resistance. That's like cheese trading, right? That's like cheese trading. So of course you can still take trades like that. It's just a different technique. It's called cheese trading. So, you know, some people, you know, we call it cheese trading. Other people in the industry, they call it momentum trading, that sort of thing. But it's like EURUSD. Last week when, you know, everyone was trapped and when things cascade towards the downside. So this is a typical area where, you know, you see a push towards the downside and price just doesn't pull back into that area. That usually happens when things are, the market is active, it's hot. This is a situation where the market was in a risk-off situation. The war was just announced, and things were looking like the brink of World War III, right? This is what it was, right? So when that happened, you know, when you see strong market move and, you know, everyone is panicking, it's gonna be very difficult to get a pullback. So this is a situation where you really need to just focus on the momentum and then just find your way in. It's not gonna be easy, all right? But, you know, look at the way it's pulling back, and it's not easy. It is not easy, because what I would usually wait for is stronger sellers showing up and then wait for a pullback after this momentum really die out. But, you know, we see strong buyers pushing up towards the upper side, sellers pulling back fairly weak, right? This time the second move for the buyers still looks strong, sellers are still looking weak. There is no real signs of sellers. Maybe here, if we do get a pullback into that area, maybe that would be for a sell. But you can hear from my voice that I'm not really convicted to sell this, you know, even when I'm looking at this at on a market replay, right? So sometimes cheese trade can get a little bit difficult to trade. Sometimes when you do want to sell a market that's really hot, you may end up selling at the lows here when, you know, we are at the resistance right here, we're at the support. But yeah, if you do see everything is moving in one direction and market activity is there, as long as your stops are not too tight, you are able to get away with it. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a live example of what I'm doing. I am really trying to see, you know, what are the market doing right off the bat. Are we in an uptrend? Are we in a downtrend? Or is the market ranging? You know, what's going on here? Now, on this time frame, on the 1 hour time frame, I don't really get to see much. I don't know what's really happening here. What I want to see is, if I go to the 240, can I get a better picture? Okay, on the 240, what I see is a range that's forming right here. Okay, what else do I see? I see a break towards the upper side, pull back into the top end of that range right here. Right, things try to go, right, can't go any higher, and then starts to crash. Again, that's a good old situation where, you know, you see that a lot of market participants are trapped in the market. When that happens, all you need to do is look for a potential pullback into that area and start looking for a sell. So it doesn't get any clearer than that, I have to say, but right now things look very, very nasty for Bitcoin. You know, if you're a long-term investor, things doesn't look good for the long-term investor right now. In fact, you know, at least for the very short term, as far as we're concerned, for the next couple of days or weeks, maybe you see some strong move towards the downside. But one thing is for sure is, if price do pull back into this high end of this range here, just pay attention. Right, pay attention and see what's going to happen there. If we do get a pullback there, a sell is likely going to happen, and you know, depending on how strong this is, that's going to tell you where Bitcoin is going to go for the next couple of weeks. But in the very, very short term, I'm looking for a potential sell in this area to move lower. If price comes up there, you don't want to engage mid-range. That's the worst place to engage. In a range trading. You know, we're in a downtrend. That's something we know for sure. We're pulling back. If we pull back into here, at least you're still following the bigger boys for a sell. And if things move down, yeah, it'd be good for a sell. Okay. I know some of you guys watching this is wondering, yeah, we know, but what about the bigger, you know, higher time frame? Are we gonna reverse and become an uptrend? I don't know if that's gonna happen anytime soon. Things look like, you know, it's coming down really strong. Yeah, definitely not anytime soon. It does feel like, you know, we still really need to fade out the momentum here to really turn it around, unless things take a major turn like this and hold. Then yes, that could be for a buy, but right now I don't have a bigger picture view on this. On the lower time frame, it does feel like it's still very, very much for the short side. Yeah, I'm not gonna cover all the markets that you guys are saying, otherwise I'll be here for ages. I'm just gonna be covering the main things that I see that, you know, there is some stuff to learn from, something that you can follow and see, you know, and then we can come back and, you know, really see how they perform following week. So the few things that I want you guys to really keep an eye on, not, you know, specifically trading them, would be gold. Just look at gold and see how it's gonna, you know, ping off those areas and see how things are gonna unfold, because that is something that's really gonna help with your market analysis, right? The other thing was dollar Swiss. Dollar Swiss is at a very, very interesting money spot area. Again, just pay attention to the 240 time frame, the 1 hour time frame, and see how things are unfolding. Again, because if you really mark out those areas, understanding what the buyers and sellers are doing, and then if you really track them and see each step along the way what they're doing, you will be able to pick up a lot of things. Once you are able to pick up a lot of things, that's where your conviction and your confidence comes in. Once you have enough confidence and conviction, that's where your trading is going to become a lot more stronger. Okay, so it's first just start off with having a good understanding of, you know, how the market moves on a weekly basis. Someone saying, I have the Market Beat app where I look to get an idea of the activity currency. Then I have the FX meter. Can you show me how I can pick a sure trade using two apps? Okay. How many of you guys actually have the FX meter and the Market Beats app? So the FX meter, it tells you the overall direction, overall direction of the market, right? So like the dollar, it should, you know, look like the dollar is gaining a bit of strength, right? So let's just say hypothetically you look at the FX meter and the dollar is showing USD is, I don't know, 5. Okay, so if the dollar is 5, it's just telling you overall market for the USD is strong. You want to go with the dollar direction. Okay, that's the overall bias, right? In terms of the actual setup, trend pullback, breaches, all that sort of thing, you want to look for them on the actual charts. So this is how it's going to look like. Look at the FX meter, right? See which currency is trending, either, you know, above +5 or below -5. If it's below -5, it's telling you that most markets are weak. If it's, you know, telling you that most currencies are weak. So I'm gonna, you know, use an example. Again, I'm just gonna use gold here, okay? If I'm looking at the 4-hour time frame and I'm looking at FX meter, and the FX meter is saying that for the for the dollar above on the 4-hour time frame, it's 4. Let's say 4 is leaning towards the stronger side. Okay, good. So by the time you look at the charts, you should see something like this, because the market, the FX meter, is tracking the previous move. So previously we have this move down across all the dollar pairs. That's gonna show number 4, you know, on the FX meter currency, on the FX meter. Okay, so by the time you open gold, it should look something like this. All right, cool. So you want to analyze this and see what you want to look for. Now let's just say, what was our trade idea earlier? Our trade idea was to look for a potential probe towards upper side into this range, and then probing back and then looking for a sell. That's what we want to look for, right? Okay, so the market beats would alert you when price is active. That basically means if this thing goes up, you get an alert. If it goes up again strong, right? It has to be strong, otherwise you wouldn't get an alert. If it goes strong, you will get an alert. So every time there is activity in the market, you will be alerted by the app, basically. When it's gonna become useful is when it's hovering around this area right here. Okay, when it's hovering around this area right here, that's the point where, right, you want to pay very close attention to what's going to happen, because if it shows power towards the downside, you want to start thinking about the sells, right? So this part here, that's where the market beats is going to come into very, very, very useful, because it's going to tell you there is momentum across the board, across all the dollar, because that's what market beat is tracking. It's tracking the entire dollar group, dollar currency, right? So if it shows a notification on this move here, that's a very good sign, because across the board all the dollars is showing strength again. Pair that up with your market analysis that you have really come into this release area from the trap buyers, and we have breached down from this range. Pair that up again with the FX meter telling you that, you know, across the board the dollar is again gaining strength. Okay, that's where you will put the two apps together with your market analysis, with your technical analysis to look for a sell. I'll see you guys hopefully soon, hopefully next week. Just keep an eye out on the email. If I do host another webinar, I'll let you guys know. Okay? All right, cheers. Bye for now.